I've chosen a song that we're going to listen to, and then I'm going to talk for a little bit. We'll have a few minutes of quiet thinking and meditation about that, and then I would like to open it up for conversation. As I had said earlier to Alice, today holds a hodgepodge of layers in our country, and I went a little differently than I thought I was going to when I was writing, so I just would invite you to really listen to the words and kind of sink down into what messages you might be hearing.
Recording. Hi, this is Chuck McCown. I am the program worship chair at Dakota UU Church, and kind of interrupting the Sunday service video this morning to tell you about the video that was shown at the service. I think just letting it play right now would be a little bit jarring to folks that are happening onto our YouTube channel looking for a liberal religious home. So without any further context, I thought maybe we would not show the video here. And also there's copyright issues. In the comments below the video on our YouTube video, there will be a link to the music video and also the lyrics, so you can watch it. You can pause it at this point right now and watch the video, and then listen to the discussion, or you can skip it, or you can read the lyrics. So it was a very interesting and engaging discussion. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
So I just invite everybody to take a breath, because for me that song is very, very hard to listen to. I come from a military family, and I could fold a flag correctly by the time I was 8 years old. I remember being 23 and watching a maintenance man outside my mom's office building. The flagpole was broken and the flag was all over the ground. And I went charging out there all indignant and picked up the flag while he fixed the pole. Then he wads it up, puts it under his arm, and walks away. And I was like, "No, sir." And he stopped and he looked at me, and I took the flag and I gave him the one end and I took the other end, and we folded it correctly, and then I just kind of went like that in his chest, and he was like, "The heck is this girl doing?" You know, he had no idea what just happened. And this whole situation, it brought me to a different place, because I was 17 years old the first time we went to war, and I can remember it. The date was January 6, 1991. My brother's best friend, who was like a best friend to me, was in the Marine Corps at 19 years old and was part of the front line that took the Kuwait airborne. What he saw over there changed him forever. And when he came home, he didn't have any tolerance of people that said bad things about the United States or the government, because he saw firsthand what other governments did to their people. And so there was this disconnect for me. And that's really when I had to sink into some of this. And then I think about the men who returned from the Vietnam War and how we treated them. They were shunned, they were denied mental health services, they were not respected or helped. And we heard stories of our soldiers and how terrible they were in other countries. And then I think, how different would this world be if we weren't so prone to violence as human beings? So I was having a conversation with a dear friend of mine the other day, and about 2 minutes in, she says to me, "People define themselves by their pain." I stopped. I wrote that down. I said, "Thank you very much. This has been an incredible conversation." She's like, "Well, if that's all you need from me today, that's awesome." And then we smiled and we went about digging deeper into that statement. And so then I get into reflection. Do I define myself by my pain? Do the people around me define themselves by their pain? And is that why we're so prone to violence on a regular basis as a species? I think that's a really big conversation with many layers, and I also think it's an important one to have. In Daryl Worley's song that we just heard, I feel like we're totally being defined by our pain. He wants us to think about the violence that was committed against us that day. He wants us to remember what we're fighting for. He even says in his lyrics that he's been amongst those that have gone away to war, and you can bet that they know just what they're fighting for. And I'm going to say he's correct, but what they're fighting for isn't what he thinks they're fighting for, or what a lot of other people think they're fighting for. I lived on a Navy base for 6 years, and those folks have no idea what they're fighting for. They're doing what they're told to do without question, and they know they volunteered, but oftentimes it was very disheartening to see how what they actually volunteered for was different than what they thought they were going to volunteer for. And so most of them, they're fighting so that they can come home and see their families another day, and until their contracts are done. And so for the last 20 years on this day in history, we have been asked, do we remember where we were when the towers fell? I do. I was in the library of an elementary school that I worked at. But today I want to ask a different question. Do you remember where you were the first time you heard about a Muslim family being attacked because they were Muslim after 9/11? You don't. What I remember is that in Connecticut and in several other cities around the country, they organized safe walks to school, where they would have white families walk with families of color to school and to buses to make sure their kids got where they were going safely. They wanted to try to minimize the violence. That was us defining ourselves by our pain, right? We were lashing out without thought of who we were lashing out against. In the Christian faith, we talk a lot about the parable where Jesus said to love thy neighbor as thyself. But I was in graduate school 2 years ago, the first time I ever heard someone ask, who is our neighbor? And it was in my Hebrew Bible class, and interestingly enough, it wasn't even in a New Testament or Christian class, it was in the Hebrew Bible class where we asked that. Because in the Hebrew Bible, there are lots of different definitions of who our neighbor was, depending on what part of the world we were talking about. And I found a sermon online that talks about that very subject. Unfortunately, it was by some big church, and so the author wasn't named specifically. And what he said was, when we dehumanize others for the sake of our own anger and fear, we sacrifice our capacity to see them as our neighbors. Our pain that we use to define ourselves causes us anger and fear. We then use that anger and fear to dehumanize others. Listen to the words that this author used. We sacrifice our capacity to see them. We sacrifice. We sacrifice something of ours to see this anger and fear. Isn't that interesting? "60 years ago or so, give or take, humans whose skin was a different color than white were fighting for people to see them as human. As a race, as a culture, as a nation, we have been sacrificing our own capacity for love and compassion because we define ourselves by our pain. And where are we today? We still find ourselves in the midst of sacrificing capacity. Today, it's not just about race or religion. We get to add the discomfort that we are caused by other brave souls who talk about sexuality and gender and who are regarding themselves even in different ways than that. And we define ourselves by pain and react in various different ways. And sometimes I wonder, are we going backwards? Vincent Van Patten, who I read for the chalice lighting, he's a gentleman that writes for a column in a newsletter that I read occasionally called Medium. excuse me, I used this quote for our chalice lighting this morning because it reminded me of what we can do when we are feeling like we're going backwards. Van Patten says we're shaping our future through our ability to see today as a gift. We all have something important to give: our attention, our compassion, our love, and our patience. And when I read that, and when I say that, and apply that to this idea of who is our neighbor, I no longer think solely about those of other faiths or colors or abilities or genders or different social locations. I also include those people who are bigoted and biased, the people who commit the hate crimes, and even the people who think and feel that way, whether they ever act on those feelings or not. Those people that we villainize because of their behavior deserve our love and compassion too. If we're called to serve in the ways of love and radical hospitality, isn't everyone included in that? Even if you don't like them, even if you don't agree with them. I find that very difficult myself, which I think is why it kept coming up in my reflections. When I left Connecticut, my minister gave me a rock from the bowl in her table. She had a table in her office that had a little bowl of baubles, and she would occasionally replenish the baubles when people would take one. She had me choose something out of the bowl, and I chose this rock. And on one side it says, it is better to love. And on the other side it says, than to seek love. It is better to love than to seek love. When I find myself in difficult circumstances where I feel like we're going backwards and I'm afraid and angry, I hold on to that rock. I keep it in my bag. And I remember that my job is to love everyone, all of us, no matter what. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to live by a certain set of principles that allow an avenue to define ourselves by something other than our pain. Our first principle of the inherent worth and dignity of all beings speaks right to who our neighbors are. And we sometimes forget that our job is to love, because we're human and we are also allowed all of our feelings. Today, we find ourselves immersed in the many layers that are the human experience of this date in history. And it is the anniversary of a very painful part of our history. It's the start of a new school year, a new fiscal year, a new church year. It's the beginning of fall and harvest. It's a time that we get to examine who we are and how we show up in the world. And we can be extra aware of who we believe our neighbors are. It's a time to practice peace and love and compassion, not just for those we know and love, but for ourselves and for those we don't know, and maybe even some of those we don't love. If the only way to bring about peace is to live in and spread peace, isn't it true that it really does begin with us? Isn't it true that there's something important taking place right now that is beyond our comprehension, and we get to be a part of it? Will your part say that your pain defined you? Or will your part say that what defined you was your commitment to love?
Would you like some music while we ponder that?
No, I think we can open it up for discussion. I don't know if we need to sit. It's a heavy space.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So what I'd like to talk about first is what messages did you receive when you heard that song? And had you heard that song before? And did you receive those same messages before?
I'd never heard it, no.
I have not heard those. Okay.
And I had immediate knee-jerk reaction.
Did you?
Yes.
What was that? Tell me.
Oh, it's like, yeah, but
Yeah.
So yeah,
Was it challenging to listen to?
It was.
yes.
An eye for an eye leaves everybody blind.
But-
Come on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was listening to it, and it's like you're singing about this one little slice of time, one moment, one incident. You're not going back to what caused why that happened.
Right.
What he did.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, this, yeah, you can go in the whole thing and say
No.
he wasn't out to start.
Yeah.
It's the U.S. people that caused him to do that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you need to look at the full story, the full, you know, and that's only, you know, what, 20 some years, 30 years or whatever. You gotta just, I mean, you keep going back and back.
Yes, there's back and back and back. There's still no justification for flying airplanes into towers.
There
I mean,
isn't.
No,
there is.
And we're not.
But, and
However,
I
I'm
know,
not saying that-
I know, but I had to say it. Because I agree completely with what you're saying.
And
Completely.
we didn't go after the people that
Yeah.
did it.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
other part.
Megan has a,
Go, Megan.
Go ahead,
go ahead, Megan.
Well, Alice just said it. Yeah, the war that we fought actually had nothing to do with the actual actions that happened on 9/11.
Yeah.
If you were going to go after a country, which I wouldn't agree with anyway, but
It would have
Saudi
been
Arabia
Saudi
do
Arabia.
with it than Afghanistan did.
Right.
And Afghanistan was just where they hold the training and stuff, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And I always sometimes say, well, how many people have we damaged as a result of revenge for that, compared to how many people died? And
Not that it excuses it, but still, hurt people hurt people.
Exactly.
And that cycle just is going to continue if you just continue hurting each other.
I thought it was a really good melody and well produced as well. I mean,
It was.
Yeah.
I mean,
Way
it
too
was
good.
it's way too good.
It was a very
It was
popular
a
song
song,
amongst others at the time, right?
So when was this song done?
Within the year after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't sure if it was new or.
No, it was shortly after they stopped showing footage on television, so
Oh.
4 or 5 months after, something like
Well,
that.
and the footage they showed on the television depended on where you lived in the United States.
That's true as well.
Because I know Minnesota, we didn't see an awful lot of the really hard stuff to watch.
what else was really interesting is that he never said what we should do after we remembered. He never really said that, but somehow, and the only enemy that he said was Bin Laden.
Yeah.
He did talk about why we're fighting, and we gotta know what we're fighting for. And it's
Right,
gotta
and
be
so
fighting.
I went there too, but I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
he never really said
What specifically, you
who
know?
we should go after.
Right. And isn't that interesting? Another piece that I found really interesting was him talking about our homeland, how important it was that we got attacked on our homeland.
Right.
Well, it's not really, I mean, yes, it's our homeland and that most of us were born and raised here right now, but who did we take it from?
Megan has a comment.
Yeah.
Well, does anyone know who Colin Jost is?
Name sounds familiar.
If you watch Saturday Night Live, he does the
Oh,
Okay.
fake news.
yeah.
Anyway, I've read his memoir, and interestingly, his mother, he comes from an area of New York where pretty much everybody are firefighters, and so they were feet on the ground during the whole period of when this happened, and many of the firemen who died, he mentions in his book, but his mother is a physician, and she was the physician to the New York City Fire Department. That was her job. And he devotes a chapter to 9/11 and what she and the fire departments went through. And it's so touching and so gives you a real respect for the firemen and how they put their lives in danger, and all of our fire personnel everywhere willingly do that. But if you can get a hold of a copy of the book for no other reason to read the chapter, I think it gives a very different perspective from that song. The song definitely got my hackles up because I think he was, and thinking about the reaction of Vietnam, I always felt that this, thank you for your service every time you turn around. It's almost as though a person can't meet a military person. They don't say hello or shake hands. They say, thank you for your service. And I always felt it was a knee-jerk reaction to try and undo what had been done to them during Vietnam, that this is a big makeup for that. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's kind of my
I
feeling.
think that's part of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's a wonder, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do wonder though too is, can we find a balance between the honors that because the firefighters, they risk their lives every day. There were doctors, and they have a very different perspective. And are they defining themselves and what they do by their pain? Or is that a different thing? And can we find a piece in the whole, how we define it and how we treat people and how we show up? I don't feel like I'm saying that very well, but you guys understand what I'm asking? Because there's this one perspective. This was just one of many songs. Today, I'm sure if you turn on country, in particular radio stations all over the country, you will hear a whole myriad of songs like this. And they're designed to get people's hackles up. They're designed, but not for the reason why ours was. And so they're designed to make get people fired up and everything. But is it for the right reasons? And what is the end result, like Alice said, what are we supposed to do when we remember? And so I wonder what that middle ground is. Is there any, and how do we do that?
There was a week or a month or something right after 9/11, and especially the next day or whenever it was, that George Bush went to New York and stood on that rubble pile with the megaphone, and listening to him. And then soon after 9/11, they did things like they blocked all of the funds that Al Qaeda had connections with in the United States and stuff like that. And I thought, maybe he's going to grow into this job and do things thoughtfully and methodically and stuff. And when it started to go to war in Afghanistan, I thought, maybe this is a good way to go after him. I don't know, kind of made me queasy. But then Iraq, and it's like, oh my God.
Right? He told us to go shopping.
Right.
Come on.
That's true. That's true.
Show them that we're not scared. Go shopping.
Right?
Oh, what the heck?
I've forgotten that.
So it's just, where is the stuff coming from, or the actions? So a lot of the song was about revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you talk about firefighters and what are their actions and why they do it?
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe they're trying to take revenge out on fire.
No.
So they're acting in response to.
Right, but
events.
the rescuers who evacuated those towers, I imagine they have some trauma and
Oh,
some
yeah.
anger and some, and that's, I guess, where I was going, because she
Oh,
was
sure.
talking
Oh, okay,
specifically
yeah.
about that chapter where his mom was the physician to most of the firefighters and whatever. Those rescue workers that cleaned up
Okay,
that.
yeah. Where
Where do they come from? What is
But-
their, how do they define themselves and how do they behave? Is, I guess, what I was
Well,
going with.
living beyond or after that,
Yes,
are the decisions of what they're doing
yeah,
now revengeful?
yes,
I think that's
yeah. Do they see it
Right.
like it's something that we need to retaliate against? Some of them probably do, some of them probably don't.
Yeah.
I imagine that we have but yeah, it's an interesting, so I guess, and my invitation is then those of us who get our hackles up regarding songs like this and that sort of thing, because we're human, we tend to other each other too, and we get stuck in this headbutting of, well, you're wrong and I'm right, and this is this and that's that. And can we just love everybody in a way that honors who we are as people and acknowledges that we don't agree with them? How do we do that? Do we as a culture know how to live compassionately like that?
Nope, no, not yet.
Well, I mean, my neighbor with the Trump sign, lovely people.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm always gonna treat them with respect.
Yeah.
Okay, might not do business with them, but I
Right.
will treat them with respect. But it's the people in power
Mhm,
who lie
mhm.
and who I don't think have anybody but their own interests at heart. Those are the people that I can't. I have a real problem.
I understand that. I do.
Because their influence is so great.
Yeah, it is.
And because they know what they're doing.
And they should know better.
Yeah.
Or feel
Well,
better.
Were they
No.
ever taught better? I mean, it
I
goes
mean-
back to, you
You
know,
would think
Yeah.
so?
yes, but it's more of
yeah,
the people that are believing them,
Yeah.
and there's that.
and
there's that.
they're empowering those people to continue doing that. So
Yeah.
how do you
Well, Alice, let's walk
change
down
that
that
rainbow?
path for a minute, that they're leaders and we're just citizens. What do we do about that as just citizens? How do we, I mean, because what would it look like if you prayed for them or did whatever it was that you do for them, instead of saying, oh my gosh, they are not good and I don't like this and I'm really mad at them and they should know better and they this and they that? What if you sat down and said, you know what? Today I'm going to hope that whatever powers that be can guide them and maybe they'll make a different choice. I won't be surprised if they don't, but maybe they will. And what if we walked on that side of wonder instead of the side of negative expectation that we walk on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mind was going to, okay, how are they defining themselves?
We don't know. And
Right.
that's the hard part for us.
But, and so I have compassion
right?
for them as human beings. I don't know what to do about to help. I really don't. But I have compassion because I know there's something motivating them to do all that.
Right.
And that they're not evil. Because there is no real evil in my opinion.
Jim?
Well, so, I mean, when I look at the stuff, there's people that the actions are either they're doing the self-centered,
Mhm.
or people are doing actions that are helping others,
Good for all.
good, just in general.
Okay.
And so when I look at things that a former president has done and the current president is doing, and the actions, one is very self-centered, the other one seems to be doing actions more to try to help.
Mhm.
So then going back to the neighbor thing, what can we do
Right.
is we need to be talking to our neighbors to say, you know, if you look at how these people are acting, are they really helping you? Or the only reason they're acting or doing this, or maybe the reason you support that person is because they're not helping you. They don't really care about what you want. It's just that you happen to believe, or okay, you know, if you look at having choice and women's rights, right? So you've got people that are saying, no, abortion is not good, right? And so at least I agree with that point with what he's doing.
Right.
And that's why they choose. But it's like, but you need to be looking at this person and say, he's not doing that because he's supporting your belief.
Right.
It's what he's
trying to control.
Right.
So.
And that's what, you know, you start looking at all the different people in those places and try to figure out, are they inward decisions or outward decisions, I guess.
Well, and this is me holding on to a thought. This is what I'm doing here. And so I want to take it down a little bit. I mean, because we can go from 0 to worldwide in a matter of seconds, right? And at the end of the day, we are who we're sitting with, right? We're who we're looking at the mirror at and everything. And so what if our actions were one and the same, that selfish and generative, all at the same time? What if we lived extravagantly lovingly because it's a selfish thing to do? What if we could, what if we lived that way? Then we don't have to talk to people. We don't have to tell people anything. People see who we are by how we behave and by how we treat people. Does that make sense? And so I guess that's my invitation, is to really, as we go into this new year and come out the other side in the spring, what are we going to work on this winter? What are we going to do with ourselves? Who are we going to be? How are we going to show up? Who is our neighbor? And what choices do we have as individuals right here and right now?
I have a teeny little example. Let's bring it way in. I was in the car with my granddaughter, and somebody cut me off or something. And I'm like, whoa! And I was like, what the heck? And I said, wow, that was a little scary. And she's like, this is maybe sharing more than my children would like. My mom and dad say bad words.
Yeah.
And so then we had a whole discussion about judgment, being judgmental, having compassion rather than, I'm like, you know, I'm trying, and I told her that, I said, you know, my first reaction is to say, you know, why did you do that to me? But I don't know what's going on with them. And I don't know, you know, I was trying to reduce some of the other influence she has.
I'll add to that. I do that. So I get a lot of guff from people who ride with me, because when somebody does something like that to me in the car, and I'll tell you, this took years of practice, like 5 or 6 years of practice, I will go, oh my gosh, that was really scary. I am so sorry. I hope your day gets better. I hope you arrive at your destination okay. And I keep going. And that is a practice that I have cultivated over the years, because I got so tired of the bombardment of the negative energy when I'm riding in the car with somebody. And so I don't want to perpetuate that environment. I don't want to invite people into that. And it's not easy. And it depends on my mood and how the day starts, right? As to how successful I am at that. But it's a practice, right? So all of this is, how do we practice being better humans? How do we practice living our Unitarian Universalist principles? And it starts with us, right? And it starts with how we live from one moment to the next.
I guess one thing that's really helpful
is intention,
Yes, ma'am.
being really, firm and connected and.
Yes.
And intentional.
Intentional.
To set an intention of whatever we're doing and where we're going and how.
And intention is a practice.
Yeah,
right?
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing, a small thing about the driving, I used to drive from Lakeville to Hopkins every day and on a commute, and it took me a while of the kind of competition of it, of finding an advantage so that you could speed on ahead and then change lanes.
Right.
I used to drive like that, and then one time on my drive home, I noticed as coming down 35W towards Lakeville, towards Burnsville, going, you can see quite a ways down to the river, and I'm seeing 10 or 15 cars or 20 all bunched up, and then one or two, and then another bunch all bunched up, and then some are trying to get through that bunch so that they can speed on it, and then if I'm one of those guys right in the middle of this two groups of people jostling, and just if it takes me 35 minutes instead of 30, okay.
Yeah.
I just kind of go with that flow.
Yes.
Right.
It's like I arrive at work and I'm like, I feel so much better.
Right. Right. Is the cost worth what we pay?
Right.
Yeah.
When I was commuting every day from Lakeville to St. Paul, and it was 35 minutes minimum was my easiest commute, and usually was much longer than that.
Oh
I
shoot!
started doing,
Forgot to
Yeah.
plug my thing in.
I started doing audiobooks, and that so much relieved me of all of the concentration on the traffic and the craziness out there. I would get to school and I was so into my audiobook. I'm like, no, I can't be at school already. No, I gotta find out what happened.
I have to focus 100% on when I'm driving.
Yeah.
But, one of my jokes, and I say it to myself, and I'm not always sure that I want to say it out loud, but something happens that's not supposed to happen, and you're dealing with a human. And the joke is, unfortunately, the world is run by humans. And the other one is, I've never made a mistake in my life. And that's that same car thing, learning how to, I've made mistakes. I've driven through a stop sign or a red light by accident before. And,
And why? Why did I run that stop sign? Either I didn't know where I was going, I was running late, there was something emotional, there was
listening
something.
to an audiobook.
But there was something distracting me, and what was that?
Yeah.
And what space are you in? So I guess that's part of the conversation that I just wanted to start today, was the many layers of who our neighbors are and how we live and how we show up in the world.
I'm still pondering defining myself by pain. I don't quite haven't.
There's Holly.
Ollie.
Yeah, actually, Barbara, that someone just said that. Would you repeat the last line of your talk, because I missed, I think, the key word. You said do you define yourself by your pain, or does something define you? And I missed that word.
Are you defined by your pain, or will you be defined by your commitment to love?
Commitment to love. Oh, okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good.
Started that, and it was, before we were the song or anything. I was going in a totally different direction.
Right?
Of, because I remember somebody saying, everybody has experienced trauma.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of it that way, not as how you treat other people or react to situations, but, and then you switch it. Oh!
We should probably wrap up and sing our closing hymn, I think.
Yeah. Our closing hymn is 131, Love Will Guide Us.
Ooh, nice.
Oh yeah, it goes off by itself.
Let's talk about
Please stand if you are able and would like to stand once again.
Oh
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we come together again.
Thank you all.
Thank you for the reminder, Barbara.
Yes.
Yes. I try to do that, and other times I'm
It's a practice, it really is.
Hope you enjoy it. Thanks.